Welcome everybody back to Veil of Sound. It is Video Interview Sunday, and you have already seen that I got somebody on the show that I'm very, very proud of having, because I think she's a very, very interesting and also very, very important figure for black metal at the moment. So, Haela from Liturgy, thanks for joining the show.
What's going on? Thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure. And first question, always, where are we catching you right now?
I'm in New York. I'm in Brooklyn. I'm sitting at home.
Okay. And another question that I always ask is, are you wearing any band merch, like a true metalhead, like little me?
It's funny. I actually was wearing a Liturgy T-shirt this morning. I kind of have an HAQQ shirt that I wear around the house. And I went out to get my coffee in it, and then I realized that the interview was coming up and that I should probably change into something else. So I was wearing my own band's merch. But I generally don't really wear a lot of band T-shirts. I used to, some, but I buy them more than I wear them, actually.
Bands would say, as long as you buy our stuff, everything is fine, right?
As long as you're selling out, yeah.
Yeah. Haela, your new record has now been out for a few weeks, 93696. Before we come to the title, how have the reactions by unimportant people like critics, reviewers, interviewers, how have the reactions been so far?
Well, I mean, I'm very happy with the response. I mean, I'm not sure what to say. We're recording this a little bit before the album is actually coming out. So
yeah, we are. But you've already heard from critics, right?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I think people see the album kind of as what it is. Like it's a very sort of epic album, and I think that sort of rings true.
You are already hinting at it. It's a very epic album. It's a 4 sides double album. Was that always the intention, or did that happen along the way?
It kind of happened along the way. Yeah, it's our longest album by far. I didn't necessarily, like, it's a little bit too long, in my opinion, in a way, from a certain perspective. I'm always really seeking to, like, make albums that are a journey, where you really, like, you put it on and, like, it has a, it just sort of has a mountain range sort of to it, which not everyone cares about doing that, particularly at all, especially these days. Like in general in music, people care about songs more than albums. But I really care about that sort of, having it be like watching a film where you're supposed to be there the whole time. And originally the album was kind of shorter. I usually write the whole record. Like I usually have a sense of the entire structure of the record in place before the songs are really done. If that makes sense. Like there's sort of less detailed versions of the songs. And then for this one, just the songs just got longer and longer and longer. So it was kind of, the structure was kind of planned as, maybe a 45 or 50-minute long thing. And then the songs just kind of kept getting longer. And so now it's sort of twice as long as I would have liked it to be. Because in a way, it's a little bit of a waste. When you're writing all this music and it's very complicated, it's almost more efficient or more useful to make it into 2 albums, so you can do less work on the next album. But I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah, but I also
had
think,
to do it.
but I also think when you say like there's a lot on the album where you even mentioned that it might be a little bit too long for your own taste. At the other end of the line, we might say that it has to be that long because you are talking about some really, really difficult topics that I think are hard to bring along in, let's say, 35, 40 minutes. Let's first explain two things, I think, that we have to explain. 93696 is a number derived from Christianity and Thelema. I hope I pronounced that second one right. I looked it up and I saw that Thelema is a very interesting spiritual movement. Can you and I maybe try to explain Thelema in a sentence or two? What is Thelema for you?
Explain Thelema. I think of it as kind of the religion of metal in a way. It's founded by Aleister Crowley, and a lot of the religion of rock music. David Bowie was very into this. Black Sabbath. Like it's kind of the modern religion of maybe self-realization or something like that, and it's very focused on the individual, and on creation. I think that's maybe the key, is that it's a religion of creation, and I think Crowley saw it as antithetical to Christianity because he saw Christianity as being about maybe submission, or encouraging people to be weak, or to sort of submit to like false morality or something like that. And but that's kind of a problem personally. I don't think that's a fair criticism of authentic Christianity. Maybe it is a fair criticism of a lot of what metal has always reacted against. Kind of conformism and oppressive morality in society and that kind of thing. And but so one can, I think that those the kind of spiritual impulses towards creation and maybe towards compassion, which is maybe a better way to interpret Christianity, that those things are actually more compatible than you might think. Or I sort of I would like that to be the case anyway, and that's kind of what this album is devoted to in a way, a world where those things are compatible.
Would you agree that maybe if we tried to put it in a nutshell, it's a contrast between believing in what you should be and becoming what you want to be?
Sure, I love it.
And that also in some way reflects in the 3 chapters that the record is divided into: sovereignty, hierarchy, emancipation, and individuation. Do you think that is a path, or do you think that is a certain path that people should try to follow if they feel as if the dictatorship of modern society and what we should become is not for them? That is a process, that the 4 stages that we have to go through?
I don't know if there's stages. The album is, it's a vision of heaven. It's kind of imagining. It's an eschatological album, so it sort of imagines what will heaven be like? What could heaven be if we're building heaven, right? So it's kind of a messianic vision of heaven, but also a humanist one. And I think of sovereignty, hierarchy, emancipation and individuation as ideals that are simultaneously governing society, something like that. And so I think that they are ideals that one can kind of cultivate within oneself, maybe successively, but I don't think it's a path so much. I think that it's I think they can be simultaneous too.
Just one question on this topic. We've already talked about it before the interview. Does this, or do those 4 parts also in some way reflect your physical transformation from male to female?
Well, I mean, one of the ideals is emancipation. And the basic idea of that one is that there is a tendency within society where more and more differentiated subjectivities should be recognized. That that's something that is negotiated over the course of history. And so I think that the gender is one of those things. So I would say that to some degree, living one's truth in all kinds of ways would be a part of that.
It's also interesting when we look at the historical context of the birth of Christianity, because in the antiquity, the notions of gender and sexuality, in some ways, after having read up a little bit on it, I believe those notions and ideas of gender, sexuality, were more open and more widely accepted than nowadays. Would you agree with that? As I know that you read up a lot on that stuff too.
Yeah, I mean that's a very complex topic. Yeah, I mean certainly. And I mean, there were lots of different cultures in the past. There's lots of different cultures in the present as well. So, the I would say in modern Christendom, or sort of the secular Western world, has had a more repressive attitude towards gender nonconformity than a lot of other cultures. There are also other cultures that have been even more repressive. I mean, I think there's different regions within different cultures too. So it's hard to really generalize. I mean, I think there's nothing quite like the modern transgender rights movement. Where, because even in a lot of other, I mean, the combination of gender nonconformity with sort of like modern secular civil rights has not really existed before, and things like hormone therapy, and it has not existed before. So there is certainly something new in all this as well. I think because there have been a lot of cultures where you can be trans, you won't get killed or completely ostracized, but you're still limited to living a certain kind of life, or you can't have a normal job, or stuff like that. So
what I find interesting in that context, is that I always have a feeling that in a lot of those societies where a kind of gender fluidity or gender nonconformity is being criticized are all very often those societies that are ruled by very strong male figures, which tells us a little bit about males in general. But let's get back to the album before we become too philosophical. 93696. First of all, it seems as if we are looking at symmetrical numbers. I mean, of course, all in a way connected to 3, Trinity, okay? but they are not symmetrical. Can you explain that title a little bit for us? You've already mentioned that it's hinting at heaven.
Yeah, I mean, there's not so much to unpack in the title. You know, it's a combination of mystic numbers that that it has a meaning. It's also kind of a creative invention. I also thought it would be interesting to just have an album title that was numbers instead of words. We never really done that before. So yeah, and a lot of, you know, certain themes kind of appear sometimes, and there's not always a reason. You know, it just sort of seemed like it'd be a cool.
It definitely, it's an eye catcher for sure. When I was sitting in school and was doing a little bit of research, one of my colleagues leaned over and he was like, "Is that something to do with Beverly Hills 90210?" And I was like, no. But it's intriguing. People talk about it. And that is something that is often happened with a lot of your album titles. You know, we had HAQQ. Now we have 93696. Vias Fatica records. So you have a knack for record titles. Is that something that comes to you in a flash, or do you really sit down and think about it?
The titles are usually in a flash, but you know, there's a whole, you know, theological and philosophical body of work that I've, you know, been developing alongside Liturgy's music. So it's always related to that, and the, you know, and the relation between them is loose. You know, it's you know, I'm more and more, you know, writing blog posts on Substack and doing YouTube videos to sort of discuss the theological ideas as crystallized, and discuss them with other people. And, you know, I talk to people on Discord a little bit. But yeah, I think for me, yeah, album titles, you know, it's like, how do you, it's such an important choice, you know, how do you choose your album title? And yeah, it's usually just kind of a sudden flash. I'm typically, like, often, I'm sort of always thinking about this stuff, you know. And I mean, it's similar kind of with musical melodies and motifs and rhythms, and it's always, if I'm in the shower or whatever, this stuff is just kind of swarming in my mind, and every now and then there's just like a sort of punctuation mark. It's like, yes, this is right. This is the right way.
What is also striking about the new album, not as if you had not done this before, but what is striking is the huge amount of details put into it. You know, sometimes we have like a little vibraphone in the background. We seem to have a flute here. We seem to have choirs, nearly liturgical choirs somewhere in there. So how hard was it for you to put all those details in your head really into songs?
Yeah, it's a detailed record. It sure is. And I mean, it's, you know, I would say it's as detailed as any, like, classical symphony, you know. And that's something that I've been working towards, because I love classical music, which is part of why I love black metal. You know, not everyone likes black metal for the same reasons that I do. But you know, I've always been really interested in the way that just the kind of droning aspect and the way the guitars go is sort of similar to, you know, a string orchestra, really. But then also just sort of, there's a kind of pre-modern aesthetic always in black metal. It just really sort of is very ripe for combining with classical music in a serious way.
Yeah.
And you know, I studied classical composition when I was younger. You know, I've studied a lot of classical pieces and scores, and I read music and that kind of thing. And it was really our last record before this, Origin of the Alimonies, was the first one that I had written a full score for. You know, that one, it's like, you know, I could hand the score to, you know, an ensemble with like a metal band and string and flute and whatever players, and they could just play it. Like there's a full score. And I've always done a lot of composing. It's kind of like the more complicated parts of the songs, I'll write in musical notation, and then the easier parts I'll just make demos of and teach the bandmates that stuff that way. But yeah, so Origin of the Alimonies was the one that I really was, you know, writing, because it's not just that there's a full score, it's also that it just has that. When you have a full score, then every single measure, you sort of have to think about what's happening for all the instruments. And so you end up working with, you know, there's just more kind of structure. There's more little processes that are playing out, or games that are being played, or sometimes you can use a computer for this stuff. You know, if I have a motif that I have in a MIDI roll, I can just be like, all right, what if I make it, you know, 1/4 of the speed and turn it upside down, you know, and I can just kind of click on it and then do that. And then I'll be like, okay, now I'm going to take that out of the guitar and I'm going to make that a bass part, actually, because it's slower, and then I'll write a new guitar part on top of it. Or I'll take the same part and speed it up, you know, but transpose it, you know, and I'll put that on the guitars. You know, it's like, that's kind of how I write the music. So yeah, for this record, this is the first one that's really been, you know, yeah, as complex as like a Brahms symphony or something. But I wanted this one to be also successful as a rock record too. You know, Origin of the Alimonies had a lot of, it sort of has the flow that classical music has, you know, kind of really, it's very, very few composed, and there's a lot of silence. There's, you know, it's very abstract, whereas this record is really driving the whole time. So the hope would be that if you don't care about classical music, you can love it as a rock record. But if you are into composition, that you sort of hear it with those other ears at the same time. That's a big part of what I was kind of going for.
Would you say that the spaces or silences in Alimony were like really spaces and pauses, whereas there are spaces in 93696 which seem to be pauses, but that are still filled with music and with detail that keep you listening on, that make you like, that bring you to the next part. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, I wanted to make the interludes. I wanted to make them real compositions. That's something, you know, in rock records, metal records. There's always like, oh, the interlude. Like, okay, this isn't a real song. You know, this is a palate cleanser.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, I don't like that. Yeah, I wanted the so-called interludes to be as carefully created as the rock songs, even though there's no rock band in them.
And then it seems to me
also each
you go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, yeah, sorry, I think there was a lag or whatever. Also, each of the instrumental tracks, most of them have a meaning for the 4 overall concepts. So each one is sort of named after like the angel of the ideal. So that kind of gives a structure to the music.
Definitely. Is it just my notion, or are a lot of the interludes also connected to classical choir music?
Yeah, definitely. So let's see, which is which. It's Angel of Hierarchy, I think, or
Yeah.
Angel of Hierarchy.
And Sovereignty.
Yeah, maybe it's Angel of Sovereignty. Anyway, I should know. One of them is scored for a children's choir. And so that, I was sort of thinking of the sort of, romantic classical imagination for that. And then one of them is scored for a string orchestra or chamber string orchestra with some glitching sounds and stuff too. And yeah, that's also, there's like a particular, I don't know which composer I had in mind exactly for those, maybe Samuel Barber or something like that. But yeah, they're meant to connect with the classical tradition, but so are the rock songs too. Maybe that's part of it, is I wanted to kind of show that type of compositional logic exists, by taking the rock band out.
It's just a way that many rock bands don't think about it that consciously.
Yeah, which is a perfectly respectable way to make music too.
Of course.
I mean, obviously, I love a lot of music like that. But,
I'm very sure that when you wrote the record and wrote those choir passages, that you were aware that with this, you're moving closer and closer to the origins of music, because we both know that music originated in the Greek theater, or at least structured music, originated in the Greek theater as part of the tragedies. Is that something you think about, or that you notice when you are writing or when you are composing your songs? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm very interested in, I guess, combining traditionalism with futurism. I think, of sort of trying to go as old as possible and also be as new as possible. And so on the other end, that's why I try to work with motifs from trap music and IDM and glitch, and then also choral music. I think my favorite style of choral music is probably like medieval, really medieval Christian sacred music. There's a couple of composers in kind of very early medieval music I just love. Perrotin, Michaud, especially French ones from like not really ancient, more like 1200, 1300, 1400s. Because I think we don't know that much about what Greek music actually sounded like, because there's not a written tradition of it. Those are the earliest like Western compositions that they were notated, and kind of the ancestor of Western notation are by Perrotin actually, and yeah, that's a huge influence on me.
Something that I would like to talk about that I think is very important, and I think a lot of people miss that in your music. I still believe that there is a lot of humor in your music as well, a lot of fun. I mean, like you named one of the first tracks, Generation, which can be either connected to the genies of the Oriental world, or to gent as a music style. How important is humor for you and fun when you are writing your songs?
Yeah, it's very important. I mean, there's, you know, liturgy is not a well understood band. And because I think a lot of, there's a lot that people generally miss. And certainly I do very much have a sense of humor about, you know, the whole project, really.
Wait, you're not
You know,
sitting
I think
around and
that,
crying all the time?
well, but that's actually another thing, is that I think that there's also a huge amount of emotion in the music. And so you know, I am sitting around crying too. And that's actually something that people often miss as well. You know,
Yeah.
I think that you know, and the music is experimental too, but I think a lot of times people focus only on that. They're like, oh, liturgy, like they're always just trying to, like, you know, go beyond what you're allowed to do, or they're trying to sort of fight against conventions of whatever kind of music. And like, that's really only a little part of it. You know, it's really, you know, it's about like joy and laughter and yeah, it's, yeah, there are a lot of, jokes, which are fairly subtle to be fair, you know. So um but yeah, so thanks for noticing that.
And I also think there is something else that a lot of people miss. We have talked about your personal transformation, and I don't want to go into that, but I also think that a lot of people miss the fact that the band and working with the band and writing songs, performing, that all of that is always a huge part for everybody that is fighting some kind of inner demon, isn't it?
Yeah, what's your question exactly? So that they're working with a band specifically
Yeah, that's like a
is
very,
part of
very
fighting
fun
an
part,
energy.
right?
Oh yes, yes. I mean this band especially, like a lot of music, like anybody could play, kind of, you know. It's like, oh, all right, you know, I need someone to play bass on this track. Like I'll find some bassist, you know. But like with liturgy, uh, so playing music with a band is, well, yeah, it's like the greatest joy that I know. Like, but just playing music in the band at all, it's just so good for my mental health. You know, it's so satisfying to sort of just, like, you know songs with someone else and then play them and like, you know, talk and perform and all that sort of stuff. But like this music is very, very challenging to play too, and it's very unique. And so you know, we practice, like, all the time. You know, we work very, very hard to be able to play it. And the songs really get brought to life, you know, through playing with the bandmates. And they're, yeah, my bandmates are, like, you know, the most important people in my life. It's very, uh yeah, I'm in awe of how good they are. And yeah, it's a real joy.
That leads to my next question, and we're nearly done with the questions before we come to the end of every Veil of Sound interview with the infamous Quickfire round. One question that struck me when I listened to it, and once again, I am also very often in awe at what you guys are performing. Would you say that you are blessed music-wise with some of the most wonderfully skilled musicians in the game?
I would say that indeed. Yeah, yeah. They're real shredders, and they, you know, I mean this. So I mean, Liturgy has had two lineups, right? So our first three records were with one group of people, and the most recent three are mostly with the same people. And there's one new person, Mario. So our drummer is David Kovsky, guitar player is Mario Myron, and the bassist is Tia Vincent Clark. And yeah, you know, they were kind of all people who I was acquainted with And yeah, I picked them out because they were already, real shredders. And then, they've also gotten better and better as we've been playing more and more, and really contributing in that way. Yeah, it's so much fun playing with them.
You've already indirectly hinted at it in your last answer. Would you say that Liturgy is a solo project performed by a great band, or would you say that it's a real band effort with somebody maybe leading the way a little bit?
I don't know that there's a need to make a super clear distinction. I mean, it's like, I have this whole kind of vision of what the music means, and I'm only the original member, and I composed the music in a very meticulous way on my own, but it's by no means a solo project. You might think it was a solo project because of all that, but the band dimension is, I mean, you can't play this music without sort of incredible musicians who are really devoted, and we're all good friends, and so you could represent the band as being either, I think, and the reality is that it's something. It's just both. It's just both.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. Last question, and here we also step into the realm of humor. Which band is more of an inspiration for you? And You Will Know Us by the Trail of Dead or My Chemical Romance? Because they both wrote concept albums before.
I mean, between those two, I would probably say And You Will Know Us by the Trail of Dead is more of an influence. I don't know My Chemical Romance that well, to be honest, but with that first Trail of Dead album, I saw them once. I don't know them that well either, but I when they had one record that really is great, and they were great live. But so I'd say them.
It struck me because when we think about concept albums in rock or metal history, we very often step back a little bit too far in time. Like we say, okay, let's talk about Genesis, The Lamp Lies Down on Broadway, or Pink Floyd's records, which are, don't get me wrong, I love many of those records, but I think a lot of people forget that we also have a lot of concept albums in modern rock and metal music. And are there any of those that you listen to that you can draw inspiration from?
Of concept albums specifically?
Or in general, modern metal music?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing I'll say is that in terms of the older stuff, which I think you weren't asking about, the album, this became more conscious to me after finishing it, but the album 666 by Aphrodite's Child is a concept album about the apocalypse. It's a double album, and it's a really great record. It's really underappreciated, actually, and I think that was a big influence on this record specifically. I think the modern metal band that is the strongest influence is probably Converge. I don't know, they're not a metal band exactly, but they're whatever kind of, they're metal.
Then I have to connect to that directly. We both have seen Converge changing styles over and over again, and with the last one doing something that they had not done before, incorporating more post-punk stuff into their music. How do you feel about those records when they step away from something that they did before?
I think they're pretty successful at whatever they do. So, and that's something I respect.
So, Haela, first of all, thanks for all those answers. But of course, Nobody is let go here at Velo Sound without answering a quick fire questions round. You will always get two alternatives, like roses versus tulips, red wine versus white wine, and you have to choose one, depending on your liking, depending which one you'd rather do. So choose one of them, and please give a short explanation afterwards. Now I wanted to go back in time. Let's step back. Pink Floyd versus Black Sabbath.
Oh, that's hard.
I know.
I'm going to say Pink Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's just both of those bands are, they're true genius bands, but Pink Floyd has kind of a wider range. I don't know. Pink Floyd has done some amazing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Black Sabbath did like sort of one amazing thing, kind of, and kept expanding on it. And Pink Floyd is kind of
The Bronx versus Queens.
Most of my friends live in Queens, so I'll stay Queens.
Mm-hmm. The Mets versus the Yankees.
I don't care. I couldn't tell you.
Ulver versus Bathory.
It's pretty hard also. I think I've had more of a personal passion for Bathory's music.
Interesting. I would have guessed Ulver. Very interesting.
Yeah, I know. I think Ulver sounds like it's more of an influence on Liturgy, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I discovered Bathory very early in my Hammerheart.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about classical and neoclassical composition. Ligeti versus Beethoven.
Ooh, these are hard. I mean, those are, well, I think Ligeti is more of like a favorite of mine, but the Beethoven is probably, I think Beethoven. Beethoven is just, Beethoven's greatness is unsurpassed, I think, so.
Mm-hmm. If you had to choose one of the four elements to not describe, but to associate you with, would you rather choose oceans, water, fire, or air?
Fire.
Mm-hmm. Would you rather play with the Ouija board or with tarot cards?
Tarot cards. I have a strong interest in tarot, and I don't really have much of a connection to the boards.
What do you enjoy more, touring or as a pair, writing and recording?
I think I enjoy them equally. Touring has the extremes of shows being amazing and traveling being terrible. And writing and recording, I enjoy more consistently.
Okay.
But, yeah.
What is more important for you to see the workings of the world for yourself? Spirituality or rationality? I know that is a very hard one.
Yeah, I would have to say both for that too. I think that each of those is very dangerous without the other.
That is an interesting point. Do you think that they are dividable at a certain point? Or are they sometimes too close to be divided?
I think that the only rational thing to do is combine spirituality with rationality.
That is a very good point. That is a very good point.
Thank you.
I'm very sure I already know the answer to the next one, but still I want to ask. Personal freedom or personal richness, like monetary richness?
Oh, wait, freedom versus richness?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like those things can. Oh, I think I get what you're asking. Yeah, personal freedom.
Mm-hmm. And the last one. We have been talking about concept albums, and I cannot let you go without having you choose two of my all-time favorite concept albums, or one of them. Genesis, The Lamp Lies Down on Broadway versus Celtic Frost's Monotheist.
I would go with Celtic Frost.
Good choice. Celtic Frost is always a good choice. Haela, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for all the detailed and very, very interesting answer. For everybody, if you have not listened to Liturgy's new record, as soon as you hear this, press pause, press stop, whatever, and go listen to the record. Take your time. It's nearly 1 hour, 20 minutes. But I can assure you, for me, I think it's going to be one of my top 10, top 15 albums this year. It's a really, really great album. It was a really, really great talk. Thanks for joining the show.